welcome to the fourth video in our Sailing into America's Heartland series. In the previous episode, you will remember we just finished the Western Erie Canal, where we enjoyed the lovely historic towns and the plentiful and well-maintained bike paths. We finally had our mast stepped in Tonawanda, New York, and we are now a real sailboat. With the canal behind us, we began exploring the American Great Lakes. This episode will cover our time in Buffalo, New York, our crossing of Lake Erie, and the several days of pesky bugs that nearly had us changing our whole summer plans. We'll also cover our time in the islands of the Western Lake Erie, our trip up the Detroit River and through Lake St. Clair, our journey up the eastern, which is the Canadian, side of Lake Huron, and our arrival in Tobermory, our first introduction to the North Channel area that we had heard so much about. Okay, here we go. We thoroughly enjoyed our time leading up to July 4th while we were tied up along the waterfront in Buffalo. The city planners have done a wonderful job here showing off the history while making sure that patrons are happy and entertained.
All right, this is Tuesday, July 4th, and the big news today is this is our first day of actual sailing on Goliath, so we're real excited about that. Got the sails up, it's a little light breeze coming from behind us, and we're headed to a place called Presque Isle State Park, as part of, well, associated with Erie, Pennsylvania. It's also been a kind of a tough day. We're happy to get sailing because we had a lot of bugs on board the boat today. We were like carpeted with these little things called midgeons and a bunch of little gnats, and they were all over the boat when we left Buffalo. And Karen just finished washing down the deck and trying to get rid of them. We got rid of most of them, but they're really annoying. They don't bite you, but they fly all around you and get in all around your face and clothing and all that kind of stuff. And literally, they were like carpeted all over the boat.
For day 2 and day 3 on Lake Erie, the bug situation was even worse, and we seriously discussed leaving the Great Lakes in case this was somehow normal. Luckily, we reached out to some friends from Toronto who educated us. It seems that on extremely light wind days, when the water is stirring very little, the larvae of these lake bugs decide it's time to hatch, and they jump on the only thing around, which was our boat. Then, the biting flies come after them and they get you while they're at it. We literally fought them all day long, washing our boat down 3 or 4 times a day while we were underway. When the wind picked up, the bugs on Lake Erie were no worse than we've experienced elsewhere. Luckily, we put into this place called Put-in Bay, just as our spirits were the most downtrodden, and this place can cheer anyone up. Check this out. In the evening, it gets so nuts in this town. There's so many golf carts that they actually need a traffic cop for the golf carts.
It's like in India. They have all these rickshaws.
Oh, I like him. He is a scream.
After the fun of Put-in Bay, we navigated up the Detroit River and spent the night at our first of many Michigan State marinas. The waterfront development in Detroit is terrific and very welcoming. The downtown areas are full of artwork and wonderful restaurants and music-filled nightlife. A highlight for us was catching up with a longtime family friend of ours who just started a job in Detroit. Upon leaving Detroit, we crossed Lake St. Clair and were joined by a steady flow of commercial shipping traffic. Many of these boats were made so they can just barely fit into the locks that control navigation throughout the Great Lakes. As these mammoth beasts pass, you can literally feel the vibration of their engines. It's pretty crazy. We crossed into Canada for the first time on this summer's trip at the northern end of the St. Clair River in Sarnia, Ontario. This river connects Lake St. Clair with the southernmost edge of Lake Huron. The current of water flowing out of Lake Huron makes passing underneath the Blue Water Bridge invigorating. Okay, we are headed up the river here just outside of Sarnia, Ontario, and pointing out
the current on this buoy. It's at least 3 knots going in the opposite direction of where we're going. So you can see our speed through the water over here on the lower panel is 6.4. And what's our speed over ground? About 3.9. So we have a lot of current, and we're hoping the Laya has a lot of energy this morning and she can get us through here. It's about 5 minutes later than I previously took the recording, and I just wanted to show this this confused water here. It's flying down here. It tumbles into this small area. This is the rest of the bridge over here. We walked along the shore here yesterday and looked out, and there were so many boats. It was just really rough and lots of current. So we were a little nervous this morning, but it looks like we're going to do okay. But you can see, amazingly, even though we're going through the water at 6.3 knots, we are hardly moving on the ground. I'm holding the camera perfectly still, and we're basically just barely going through the water and not a lot else. Making a little headway, but not much. So this is the part that, you know, you sort of hope everything holds together and you don't get pushed sideways from an eddy. We're going, how fast are we going over ground? 1.8 over the ground. So got at least about a 4 knot current against us. Fluctuates a little. At one point we got down to, I think, 0.8 moving over ground. So pretty impressive amount of power in this water. Okay, so we made it through. How you feeling there, Captain?
Much more relieved.
Yeah? What's our speed over ground?
3.7.
Oh, 3.7, wow. So now we can look at the mighty Lake Huron. So we can see barely the sides of the opening, but not a thing after that. It is a pretty huge lake. So we're gonna go about 55 miles today up to a place called Goderich, and I'll leave you with the lovely picture of the lighthouse as I close.
All right, so we are in the port of Goderich, which is in Ontario. Goderich is a nice little town. It is one of the things it's known for is its salt mine. And you can kind of see some of the buildings in the distance there. We're kind of low down on the water. You see a lot of rail cars here that I presume are for loading the salt. And they have apparently silos here, which I don't know if that's for storing salt or for storing grain. I can't quite tell. Probably for salt. No real anchorage possibilities around this area. We'll probably be in marinas predominantly on this part of the trip up to Georgian Bay. But we just did a walk in town, and it's really, really nice. They have a beautiful town square. I should say not square, but it's more round. Big wide streets, lots of lampposts with flowers hanging down and banners around. And it just was a very approachable, walkable little city. And a lot of great things. But anyway, back to the salt mine. They gave us a little card that gives some of the history of the salt mining, and I'll just read it to you. This pure rock salt was taken from a huge bed of salt some 1,800 feet below the surface of Lake Huron. It was mined by Sifto, Canada, at their salt mine located at the port of Goderich Harbor, which is where we are. Salt was first discovered in Goderich by Samuel Platt in 1866. Today, the mine in Goderich produces more than 45% of all the rock salt mined in Canada. And the salt is shipped by lake freighters, trucks, and trains all over the North American continent. Sifto's Goderich mine is the largest mine in the Western world. Throughout the years, salt has been known as a peace symbol and was often presented as a gesture of welcome and friendliness. We hope you will accept a small piece of pure salt as a token of welcome to Canada's prettiest town. So, hard to see probably, but inside this little bag is a little chunk of our very own rock salt from the port of Goderich.
Here is a drone flyover of Kincardine, the second town we stopped at on our way north along the eastern shore of Lake Huron. This town has a terrific Scottish history that I talk a fair bit about in a dedicated blog post I wrote last summer. I'll link to that post in the video description. After one more very long day of sailing, we arrived in Tobermory. What a special place. One of the first things we did is take a bike ride to this swimming hole called the Grotto. If this is the start of Georgian Bay in the North Channel, we are in for a treat.
Okay, here we are in 18-degree water, and both Tom and I are in. The waves are pretty big, so it keeps bouncing us around, so sorry about that. But the water, 18 degrees Celsius, so pretty darn freaking cold. It takes a while to get used to it, but this area is just gorgeous. It's all this, it's the finishings of the Niagara escarpment that we've talked about so much, where these rock formations just don't deteriorate like the rock around them. So it's awfully pretty. And there's Tom out there.
Well, that concludes this episode. Join us next time as we explore the island group called the Benjamins. We venture into Bay Finn, then make our way over to Mackinac Island and on into Lake Michigan and to the very popular and beautiful Door Peninsula. Thanks for watching.